St. Michael's School, with its weathered red brick walls and tall, dusty windows, stands imposing on the horizon of the small town. Once a symbol of prestige and learning, it is now only a silent monument of past times. Overgrown vegetation has invaded the yard and the main entrance, creating an aura of abandonment and mystery. The night breeze makes the trees whisper untold stories, while the moonlight casts unsettling shadows on the forgotten structure. Sarah Johnson, a renowned investigator in the field of paranormal phenomena, slowly walks along the narrow path that leads to the school. With her brown hair tied in a tight bun and green eyes exuding determination, Sarah carries a history of solved cases that defy rational understanding. From a young age, she developed a fascination with the unknown, an insatiable curiosity that led her to unravel mysteries few would dare to explore. She parks her old car near the rusty gate, the sound of the engine shutting off echoing in the nocturnal silence. The cold night wind blows softly, making her adjust her coat. The building in front of her, with its time-stained walls, seems to watch her back, as if aware of her presence. Sarah feels a shiver run down her spine but moves forward with firm steps, each movement carefully calculated. As she walks through the yard, she recalls the stories she heard about St. Michael's, a school that once housed hundreds of students, now abandoned after a series of tragic events that culminated in a young student's suicide. The legend says that the boy's spirit still haunts the corridors, trapped between the world of the living and the dead, seeking release. Sarah passes through the main entrance, pushing the wooden door that creaks under her weight. The sound echoes through the empty hallways, amplifying the sense of loneliness and abandonment. The interior walls, covered in graffiti and moss, tell a story of despair and neglect. Fragments of paper, torn notebooks, and overturned chairs compose a scene of silent chaos. With her flashlight in hand, Sarah illuminates the path ahead, each beam of light revealing more of the dark and desolate environment. She takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of the place, as if the memories of past events still lingered in the air. This is the place where Tommy's tragedy occurred, and she is determined to uncover the truth behind the hauntings that torment St. Michael's. Sarah's investigation is just beginning, but the air is already charged with palpable tension. She knows that every step taken inside the school will bring her closer to unraveling the dark secrets it holds. And with that, she hopes not only to find answers but perhaps bring some peace to the restless spirit that haunts her. Sarah slowly advances through the dark corridors of the school, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The beam of her flashlight pierces the darkness, revealing rows of rusty lockers and slightly open classroom doors, creaking softly at the touch of the breeze. The smell of mold and old dust fills the air, mingling with an indefinable sense of unease. With each corner turned, Sarah feels the atmosphere grow heavier, as if the school's walls were laden with painful memories and negative energy. She passes by a classroom, its dusty windows allowing only a faint gloom to enter. The desks are scattered chaotically, some turned sideways, others piled haphazardly, as if abandoned in a hurry. As she continues her exploration, she notices the temperature seems to drop gradually. A shiver runs down her spine, and she adjusts the scarf around her neck, trying to shield herself from the increasing cold. The whispers begin to be heard, almost indistinguishable but present. Loose and fragmented words, laden with sadness and despair, float in the air, becoming clearer as Sarah advances. Further down the corridor, she stops in front of an old music room. The door is slightly ajar, creaking slightly as Sarah pushes it open. Inside, an old piano dominates the center of the room, its keys yellowed by time and covered in dust. Sarah's flashlight illuminates scattered sheet music on the floor, some torn, others faded, all silent witnesses to a disturbing past. As she examines the room, the feeling of being watched intensifies. The sound of soft, dragging footsteps seems to come from somewhere nearby, but when she turns the flashlight, there is no one in sight. The tension in the air is palpable, almost suffocating. Sarah takes a deep breath, trying to maintain calm and clarity amid the growing discomfort. Continuing her exploration, she reaches the school's gymnasium. The bleachers are covered in dust and cobwebs, and the silence is broken only by the occasional sound of dripping from the ceiling. As she crosses the vast, empty space, Sarah can't help but imagine the voices and laughter of students that once echoed there, now replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. Suddenly, a distinct sound catches her attention, a faint sob, almost inaudible, coming from a nearby room. Sarah cautiously approaches, the flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. When she opens the door, she finds a small cleaning closet. In the corner, an indistinct figure seems to move, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. The air around her seems to vibrate with invisible energy, further increasing the sense of unease. With each step taken inside the school, Sarah feels Tommy's spirit's presence. The pain and suffering embedded in the walls seem to manifest in subtle but undeniable ways. The initial exploration confirms what she already suspected. There is something profoundly wrong with St. Michael's, something that can only be understood by facing the mysteries hidden in the shadows. With the flashlight still in hand, Sarah continues to advance through the school's corridors, each discovery adding layers of complexity to the mystery surrounding St. Michael's. She heads to what appears to be the old teacher's room, a large room with scattered tables and chairs, some overturned and others covered by a thick layer of dust. In one corner of the room, a large shelf filled with files catches her attention. Sarah approaches the shelf and begins pulling out drawers one by one, revealing piles of school records. She finds student files, teacher reports, and various administrative documents. Among the papers, she discovers something that immediately stands out: a set of letters and diaries that seem to have belonged to the school's students and teachers. She sits in one of the chairs, positions the flashlight to better illuminate the documents, and begins to read. The letters and diaries reveal a disturbing story of constant and ruthless bullying. Students describe an atmosphere of fear and cruelty that permeated the corridors, and several names appear repeatedly, among them Tommy, a boy who seemed to be the primary target of the abuse. Sarah finds Tommy's diary, its pages marked by the suffering of a young boy who felt there was no way out. Tommy's notes are filled with sadness and hopelessness, detailing the daily abuses he endured. He talks about being ridiculed, excluded, and ultimately about the growing sense of isolation that led him to the tragic decision to take his own life. In addition to Tommy's diary, Sarah finds letters from teachers, some of whom express deep concern about the school's environment, while others seem to ignore or even justify the abusive behavior of the students. One letter in particular, written by the school principal, mentions the inability to control the situation and suggests that certain students brought the problems upon themselves, a shocking evidence of neglect and lack of empathy. As she continues to rummage through the documents, Sarah discovers a report detailing the final incident, the day Tommy committed suicide. The report is cold and clinical, but between the lines, it reveals the extent of the torment he suffered. The school tried to cover up the case, but the records show that the events of that day left an indelible mark on the students and teachers who witnessed the tragedy. Each discovery increases Sarah's sense of urgency and sadness. She realizes that the school is not just a place haunted by a restless spirit, but also a silent witness to a story of human pain and suffering. The voices of the past seem to intertwine with the present, and Tommy's figure becomes clearer in her mind. With the information collected, Sarah begins to reconstruct Tommy's tragic story, the boy whose restless spirit haunts the corridors of St. Michael's. Sitting in the old teacher's room, she revisits each diary, letter, and report, seeking to better understand the life and torments Tommy faced. Tommy was a quiet and introspective boy, often lost in his own thoughts. He was intelligent and kind, but his differences made him an easy target for the school's bullies. The first entries in his diary show a hopeful boy, eager to learn and make friends, but who soon found himself enveloped in a hostile and cruel environment. The students who bullied him were relentless. Using cruel and humiliating nicknames, they isolated Tommy from any possibility of positive social interaction. Tommy's notes reveal a pattern of abuses ranging from verbal insults to physical assaults, which he tried in vain to hide from teachers and parents. One of the most painful accounts Sarah finds in Tommy's diary is of a specific event that occurred in the school's yard. He describes in detail how he was surrounded by a group of classmates and publicly humiliated, his belongings thrown on the ground and trampled, while laughter echoed around him. The shame and helplessness he felt at that moment turned into despair and loneliness. Tommy also mentions the few times he tried to seek help. He wrote about the conversations he had with teachers, who often downplayed the severity of the situation or suggested that he simply ignore the bullies. This lack of support reinforced the feeling that he was alone in his struggle, with no one to turn to. As the diary entries progress, Tommy's tone becomes increasingly dark. He begins to express thoughts of hopelessness, mentioning how the bullying affected his mental and emotional health. The last months of his life were marked by a growing sense of isolation and despair, with each day bringing new torments and no prospect of relief. Sarah also finds letters from Tommy's parents, pleading with the school administration for more effective measures to protect their son. The responses they received were cold and bureaucratic, reflecting an institution more concerned with its reputation than with the well-being of its students. This institutional abandonment was one of the factors that contributed to Tommy's tragic decision. The culmination of Tommy's story is the fateful day he took his own life. In the diary, there is one final entry written in trembling, desperate handwriting. Tommy bids farewell to his parents, expressing the love he feels for them and apologizing for not being strong enough to endure the suffering. He mentions the place where he decided to end his life, an old tree in the schoolyard, a place that symbolized both refuge and the stage of his pain. With a heavy heart, Sarah understands that her mission is not only to solve a supernatural mystery, but also to give voice to a boy who was silenced by the cruelty of his peers and the indifference of school authorities. Tommy's story is a painful reminder of the devastating effects of bullying and the need for empathy and intervention. Determined to help Tommy's spirit find peace, Sarah prepares for the next steps of her investigation, knowing that each discovery brings her closer to the truth and the possibility of liberation for the tormented boy. She feels Tommy's presence more intensely now, as if he is accompanying her journey, eagerly awaiting the moment he can finally rest in peace. As Sarah advances in her investigation, the supernatural manifestations begin to intensify, confirming that Tommy's spirit is aware of her presence and her efforts to uncover the truth. These manifestations are initially subtle but become increasingly aggressive and disturbing. That night, while Sarah reviews the documents in the teacher's room, a supernatural cold invades the environment, and her breath begins to form small clouds of vapor. The flashlight, which was steady in her hand, starts to tremble slightly, and the whispers become louder, almost audible, but still indistinct. Sarah feels her skin tingle, aware that she is not alone. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoes down the corridor, slowly approaching. Sarah stands up, flashlight now firmly in hand, and heads for the room door. When she opens it, the light reveals an empty corridor, but the footsteps continue, as if an invisible someone is moving around her. The lockers along the corridor begin to bang softly, as if an invisible force is trying to communicate. Sarah recalls Tommy's name and, in a low voice, calls out, "Tommy, I'm here to help. Can you hear me?" The sound of the footsteps stops, and the silence becomes even more oppressive. She feels a strong presence, and when she looks around, she sees an indistinct shadow at the end of the corridor, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. The feeling of being watched is undeniable. Returning to the teacher's room, Sarah continues to investigate, but now with heightened vigilance. The air seems to vibrate with restless energy, and objects begin to move on their own. A book falls from a shelf with a thud, and when she picks it up, she realizes it is Tommy's diary. The open pages show an entry she had not yet read, describing his final thoughts of despair. While reading, the room door slams shut abruptly, and the lights begin to flicker. Sarah's flashlight casts erratic beams of light, revealing glimpses of shadows that seem to dance on the walls. The whispers intensify, becoming almost words, laden with pain and suffering. She feels the urgency in Tommy's voice, as if he is trying to communicate something vital. In an effort to calm the spirit, Sarah whispers words of comfort, promising to do everything she can to free him. Suddenly, the chair she was sitting on drags violently across the floor, and a picture frame on the wall falls, revealing a scrawled message behind it, "Help me." Tommy's desperate plea is clear, and Sarah feels a weight in her heart. The night progresses, and the manifestations continue. Sarah encounters a classroom where the chairs begin to move on their own, forming a circle around her. In the center of the circle, a piece of chalk rises and starts writing on the blackboard, "I'm not alone." She feels the presence of other spirits, perhaps students who also suffered and whose stories are intertwined with Tommy's. A sense of panic grips Sarah for a moment, but she quickly regains control. With the flashlight and Tommy's diary in hand, she heads to the schoolyard, where the tree mentioned by Tommy stands against the night sky. The atmosphere is even more charged there, with the wind blowing in cold gusts and the leaves rustling like continuous whispers. In the yard, Sarah feels a stronger, almost tangible presence. The shadows seem to move with a life of their own, and she sees glimpses of a small, indistinct figure near the tree. Approaching cautiously, she feels a wave of sadness and despair emanating from the spot, confirming that she is at the center of Tommy's manifestations. Determined to communicate directly with Tommy's spirit, Sarah decides to conduct a seance. She knows it is a risk, but feels it is the best way to understand what Tommy needs to find peace. She chooses the school library, a place that, despite the abandonment, still carries traces of its former importance. The shelves, filled with dusty books, create an atmosphere of relative calm, and the large windows let in a faint moonlight. Sarah carefully prepares the space, positioning candles around a table in the center of the room. She draws a circle of protection on the floor with chalk, using ancient symbols she learned in her studies on rituals of communication with spirits. She places a small mirror in the center of the table, a tool she believes helps in the manifestation of spirits, and an Ouija board, hoping Tommy will communicate through it. With everything ready, Sarah sits at the table, takes a deep breath, and lights the candles, creating a soft, flickering light. The air seems to vibrate with invisible energy, and the silence becomes almost tangible. She closes her eyes for a moment, concentrating, and then begins the seance. "Tommy, if you are here, please talk to me. I'm here to help. I want to understand your pain and find a way to free you." For a few moments, nothing happens. The silence is oppressive, and Sarah feels her heart racing. Suddenly, the candle flames flicker violently, as if an invisible wind passed through the room. The Ouija board pointer starts to move slowly, forming letters one by one. HELPME. Sarah feels a shiver run down her spine. I'm here, Tommy. I'm listening. What happened to you? The pointer moves again, faster this time, as if Tommy's spirit is eager to communicate. The letters form painful and fragmented words: SUFFERING, BULLYING, PAIN. The room seems to shrink around Sarah, and the air becomes heavier. She feels Tommy's presence more intensely, a mix of despair and hope. I know you suffered, Tommy. I'm here to end it. How can I help you find peace? The pointer pauses for a moment, then begins to form a new message: SORRY. Sarah realizes that Tommy carries a sense of guilt, perhaps for believing his death caused pain to others. You don't need to apologize, Tommy. You were a victim of something terrible. Tell me what I need to do to help you. Suddenly, the room temperature drops sharply. The shadows on the walls seem to move on their own, and the whispers intensify. Sarah struggles to stay calm, focusing on communicating with Tommy. The pointer begins to move again, forming one final word: FREE. Sarah understands that freeing Tommy's spirit is crucial. But how? She needs more information. Tommy, how can I free you? What do I need to do? Before the pointer can respond, a loud noise echoes through the room, as if something had been knocked over. Sarah looks around, feeling the tension rise. The candles flicker violently, almost going out. The feeling of being watched is intense, almost unbearable. Suddenly, Tommy's indistinct figure appears in the mirror at the center of the table. His expression is one of deep sadness but also hope. He raises a hand, pointing towards the direction of the tree in the yard, where he took his life. Sarah understands that she must go there, that the key to freeing Tommy lies in that place. With the seance interrupted but with a new clarity about the next step, Sarah extinguishes the candles and gathers her belongings. She stands up, feeling the weight of the mission still ahead. Tommy has shown her the way, and now it is her responsibility to move forward, facing the challenges that await at the tree that witnessed the tragic end of a tormented boy. With a focused mind and a heavy heart for the mission she must complete, Sarah walks through the dark corridors towards the schoolyard. Each step echoes against the walls, amplifying the sense of solitude and abandonment. She remembers what Tommy showed her during the seance, the tree in the yard, the place where he met his tragic end. Upon reaching the yard, the full moon casts a silver light over the old tree. The leaves rustle softly in the wind, creating an almost melancholic murmur. The atmosphere is charged with dense energy, and Sarah feels Tommy's presence more intensely than ever. The tree, with its robust trunk and long branches, seems to watch over the place with an almost sentinel-like presence. Sarah approaches cautiously, feeling the temperature drop even more. The air around the tree is icy, and each breath she takes is visible as small clouds of vapor. She kneels before the trunk, placing her hands on the cold ground. Tommy, I'm here. I know this is the place where you suffered most. Please, help me understand how I can free you. Suddenly, a gust of wind passes through her, making her clothes and hair flutter. The shadows around the tree seem to twist, forming indistinct figures that approach and retreat. The whispers that were once just distant sounds now become clear and desperate words. Help me, free, pain echo around her, creating a cacophony of suffering. Tommy's figure slowly materializes before her, almost translucent, with an expression of deep sadness and pain. His eyes, filled with ancient sorrow, meet Sarah's. He raises a trembling hand, pointing to the tree trunk where something seems to shine under the moonlight. Sarah approaches, following Tommy's gesture, and discovers a small mark carved into the bark, a strange symbol she recognizes from rituals of spiritual protection and liberation. With a firm hand, Sarah touches the symbol, feeling a wave of energy pass through her. The ground around the tree seems to vibrate, and the voices of the other spirits become sharper, almost a scream. "I'm here, Tommy. I'll free you," she promises, beginning to recite ancient words of liberation she learned in her studies. With each word she pronounces, Tommy's figure begins to glow with a soft light, while the shadows around him agitate violently. The other spirits, those who also suffered and are trapped at the school, seem to react to the ceremony, some appearing briefly beside Tommy before disappearing again. The air is charged with tension, and Sarah feels the energy intensify around her. Suddenly, a powerful force strikes her, as if something or someone is trying to stop her. She stumbles but holds her ground. The figure of the old school principal, a man with a severe appearance and cold eyes, emerges from the shadows, radiating malevolent energy. "You can't take them from me," the spirit's voice echoes, filled with rage and despair. "They are mine." Sarah feels a chill run down her spine but remains firm. "They don't belong to you. Your reign of terror is over." She continues to recite the liberation ritual, each word weakening the principal's malevolent presence. He advances, trying to intimidate her, but Sarah doesn't look away. With unwavering determination, she raises her voice, reciting the final spell. A bright light emanates from the symbol on the tree, enveloping Tommy and the other spirits. The principal's figure screams in agony, his form beginning to fade in the bright light. Sarah feels the resistance diminishing, the evil that had permeated the place starting to dissipate. With one last scream, the principal's spirit disappears, leaving behind a growing sense of peace. Tommy's figure, now glowing with a pure and serene light, smiles at Sarah. He whispers a thank you, his voice soft as a summer breeze. "Thank you. I am finally free." He begins to disappear slowly, his form disintegrating into small fragments of light that rise to the sky. Sarah watches, feeling tears streaming down her face, relieved to have fulfilled her mission. The yard, once a place of pain and suffering, is now imbued with a sense of tranquility. Sarah knows that, although the school still carries the scars of the past, the spirits that haunted it have finally found peace. She stands up, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders, and looks at the tree one last time, knowing that Tommy's sacrifice was not in vain. With a light heart, Sarah heads back to the school, ready to conclude her investigation and share Tommy's story, ensuring that his suffering and liberation are never forgotten.